Antoinette is a 2006 historical drama film written and directed by Sofia Coppola and starring Kirsten Dunst. The movie is based upon the book Marie Antoinette, The Journey by Antonia Fraser. In this video, we'll look at approximately 70 of Marie Antoinette's costumes worn by Kirsten Dunst against a backdrop of the Palace of Versailles, where the production was given unprecedented access. To help me wade through this tsunami of outfits, I have sought out some help from the Costumer's Guide to Movie Costumes. If you're looking for some more in-depth analysis on many of the Marie Antoinette costumes, I encourage you to check out her website. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. The costumes were designed by Italian costume designer and four-time Oscar winner, the Grande Milena Canonero. Canonero won both an Oscar and a BAFTA for Best Costume Design for Marie Antoinette. You might know Canonero's work on Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, A Clockwork Orange, and Barry Lyndon, for which she won her first Academy Award in Best Costume Design. Canonero also costumed several of Wes Anderson's pictures, including The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, The Darjeeling Limited, The Grand Budapest Hotel, for which she won her fourth Oscar, and the soon-to-be-released The French Dispatch. At 74, she's still going strong. Before we move ahead, there are spoilers in this video, and I've created chapters to make it easy to skip ahead at any time. I also think that it's important to note that my background is in costuming and that I'm not an historian. So while I attempt to be accurate, as the 18th century silhouettes are very complicated and occasionally the lines are blurred, I will get some things wrong. In creating the costumes for Marie Antoinette, Milena Canonero and 6 assistant designers created the gowns, hats, suits, and prop costume pieces. 10 rental houses were also employed, and the wardrobe unit had several transport drivers. The wardrobe department worked 24-hour shifts just to keep up with production demands. The shoes were made by Manola Blahnik and Pompey, and hundreds of wigs and hair pieces were made by Rocchetti and Rocchetti. The jewelry in Marie Antoinette was not to be outdone by the costumes, wigs, and shoes. French jewelry house Fred Leighton exclusively provided nearly $4 million worth of gems. A Fred Leighton rep stated that this was very much what women of the court would have worn. Sofia Coppola added that, "We took certain licenses. I wanted to capture the palette of a teenager, bright turquoise and pink candy colors." The bulk of the clothes were made in ateliers in Rome's Cinecittà studios. Canonero said for the fabrics she chose beautiful silks, taffeta, and satin. According to the London Times Magazine, at the start of pre-production, Sofia Coppola handed Milena Canonero a box of pastel-colored macaroons from the Liguri pastry house. Canonero said, "She told me, these are the colors I loved, so I used them as a palette." She said, "Sofia was clear about the coloration but left the rest to me. We squeezed the essence of the period without reproducing it. Even if you think you know a lot about it, you always have to look for a new angle. I simplified the very heavy look of the 18th century. I wanted it to be believable but more stylized." In a behind-the-scenes documentary, she said, "She's the Queen of France, so naturally she has lots of changes. She goes over 19 years. We're not going to do an academic movie about Marie Antoinette. As you know, it's more moody and it's stylish. It gives an interpretation of the 18th century cinephile point of view, a sensitivity. We're taking a little bit more liberties." Canonero said that Sofia Coppola wanted to have a fresh approach to paint a canvas. She did not want to reproduce in a cinematic way the painting of Marie Antoinette that you see in Versailles. But she added that the cut of the clothes was perfectly correct, and of course you always look at something that exists in the past and then depart from there. Canonero started by throwing pieces of material of Kirsten to see what colors suited her best. She said, "I hardly used wigs because they weren't right for her. We thought that maybe we could have gone more crazy, but there was just not time." Kirsten Dunst said of the process, "My hair and makeup. My hair took 2.5 hours with makeup, all of it together. They curled my hair every day and then just stocked basically different wigs and pieces onto my head and then glazed it with a nice powdery finish. In the following chapters, I feature approximately 70 costumes in this video. I thought that the easiest way to group them is by the basic silhouette. So let's get started. While not the first look we see, it is the first outfit worn in the chronology of the story. A 14-year-old Marie Antoinette's first traveling outfit is a sort of caraco with a contrasting quilted petticoat. According to American Duchess, a caraco is a long-length jacket with a fitted back like a robe à l'anglaise. The length of the skirt of these jackets seems to be about mid-thigh. The costume is possibly influenced by this portrait depicting a riding habit. Along the journey, I'm not quite sure when, Maria transitions into the sweet two-piece outfit, again a fitted jacket and petticoat. The outfit is trimmed with accents of white fur. Under the suit, she wears underpinnings that include a shift, stays, panniers, and a crinoline. This creates the correct silhouette. When she arrives in France, she is completely stripped out of her Austrian clothes and into her new French wardrobe, including these fancy new stays and panniers. She then dons her first French outfit, a blue silk caraco and petticoat with a matching tricorn hat. Blue seems like an obvious choice for Marie, since not only is bleu de France a color traditionally used to represent France, but blue is also the color favored by royalty. Marie has another caraco and petticoat with a matching tricorn hat, this time in bubblegum pink. While the pinks would likely have not been this vivid, it was a very popular color. It was not until the latter half of the 18th century that pink truly became a fashion statement. According to This is Versailles, from this period on, pastel tones became more in vogue compared to stronger colors that had previously dominated. Consequently, pink took over where a deeper red had previously been preferred. This bodice is also a zone front, which we will get to later in the video. Many of the costumes from the Affair of the Necklace, which was also designed by Canonero, are repurposed for Marie Antoinette. The costumer's guide suggested that this outfit was also worn in the Affair of the Necklace, but she thinks that the gown was retrimmed with the added feather and box-pleated trim. This white robe à l'anglaise, or English gown, is the first costume we see Marie Antoinette wearing in what appears to be in Versailles and on screen oh so briefly. The little shock of pink in the netted crinoline coordinates with offerings of sweets around her. It looks as though the sleeves are detachable, or perhaps a decision was made not to use them. The robe à l'anglaise, as described by the Metropolitan Museum in New York, was developed with a fitted back after the style of dress worn in England. The silhouette, composed of a funnel-shaped bust feeding into wide rectangular skirts, were often open at the front to expose a highly decorated underskirt and were supported by panniers created from padding and hoops of different materials such as cane, baleen, or metal. This silk peach English gown, again coordinating with Marie's apartment, is thought to have been inspired by this painting of Marie Antoinette. In this portrait, Maria Antonia is only 7 years old. Marie's flowered church dress is worn with these gorgeous embroidered fingerless gloves. I'm not entirely sure what color they are, perhaps a dark salmon. The Fibre de Fashion blogger determined that the fabric used in this gown is made from Fragoli by Robelli. They write on their blog that the Venetian company Robelli, whose history spans more than 150 years and which specializes in the creation of high-end fabrics for interior design, was one of the fabric producers chosen by a costume designer from Turin to create the costumes and sets for the film Marie Antoinette, directed by Sofia Coppola. Robelli is also a major supplier to HBO's Game of Thrones, with many of their fabrics used in the costumes. Canonero said in a behind-the-scenes video about this costume, worn while Marie is playing cards, "Probably they never would have used this color, it's a bit too lilac-y, definitely would never have put the black on the ribbon." Marie dons many pastel blue dresses, including this sweet one that she wears on the balcony at Versailles, and this other silk gown when she wakes up after a night of drinking, the aptly named hangover dress. This is Versailles blog stated that Marie Antoinette particularly adored pastel blue. In fact, her fondness for blue was such that several portraits of her depict her in this very shade. During the I Want Candy montage, we see Marie being fitted in this exquisite blue number with silver accents. She wears it during the coronation celebrations with this awesome boat headpiece. The same gown was used for the spread in Vogue magazine. And the gown was later shown during the Hollywood costume exhibit, along with many of Hollywood's iconic costumes. Here's another peach number that she wears while walking through the gardens of Versailles with her ladies-in-waiting. And this white silk party dress that she wears for her 18th birthday with the accent of silk flowers along the collar. And she adds this fur-trimmed silk cloak to watch the sun come up. While the dress is worn with a turquoise petticoat, the Costumer's Guide stated on their blog that one of their colleagues believes that this is the same dress that Marie wears for her daughter's christening. And while we're on costumes that are used more than once, the Costumer's Guide also states that the yellow dress with a dotted motif of sorts on the left is made of the same fabric as the one on the right, although she says that it's possible it's just the same dress retrimmed. And she also adds that this spectacular hat worn by Marie was also used in 1975's Barry Lyndon. As I mentioned before, Canonero won an Oscar in costume design for that film, so this hat has been featured in 2 Oscar winners. And finally, this is the last English gown that Marie wears from what I can ascertain. So as you likely noticed, as the story progresses and as the tone of the story shifts, her color palette becomes more muted and darker. And while not quite a puce color, Marie Antoinette introduced a new color to the fashion stage in 1775, according to This is Versailles. They say that the color varied from a reddish tan brown to grayish purple. However, when Louis XVI saw it, he jokingly remarked that it looked like the color of a flea. Thus, the name was born since puce is flea in French. One of the most commonly worn gowns by Marie Antoinette in the movie are Robe à la Française, also called a sack or sack-back gown. This was a fitted bodice gown which opens to show the stomacher. It has 2 large double pleats that hang down the back from shoulder to hemline. 2 great examples of sack-back gowns in the movie are Marie's wedding gown and coronation gown, although they aren't nearly as elaborate as they would have been. In real life, Marie Antoinette's wedding gown was made from silver cloth, bedecked in diamonds and other jewels. According to the Met, a robe à la Française was derived from the loose negligee sack dress of the earlier part of the century, which was pleated from the shoulders at the front at the back. The wide skirts, which were often open at the front to expose a highly decorated underskirt, were supported by panniers created from padding and hoops of different materials such as cane, baleen, or metal. Here's another pale blue silk dress with contrasting pink bows and a matching hat that Marie wears to church featuring a sack back. It's thought that the dress might have been inspired by this other youthful portrait of Marie Antonia, again when she was just 7 years old. Note that in this portrait, like with the blue church outfit, Maria is wearing a neck ruffle with a bow. These 2 gowns are made from what looks like a diaphanous silk. Let me know in the comments which one of Marie's gowns are your favorite. This gown features trim known as furbelows. The fabric of this gown looks similar to the patterns featured in Marie Antoinette's book of fabric swatches. And while it's hard to tell from watching the movie, this dress is also a sack-back gown, as we see pictured in this magazine feature. Now this gown, again only worn for this very short scene, is unique in that it's printed in the same motif, albeit in a much softer hue, as the wallpaper in Marie Antoinette's bedroom. Next to Marie's wedding gown, her coronation gown is heavily decorated with beading and lace and bows on the stomacher and overskirt. Canonero said, "For Marie Antoinette, I used original lace from the 18th century. In those days, all of the ladies in the court would be covered in lace because it was a way to show how rich you were. They had much more jewelry than I used. I preferred the decorations of the dresses to be more graphic than lacy, even though I used beautiful period lace sometimes. This silhouette was new to me. The pet en l'air is a jacket that is basically just a short version of the sack dress and informal articles of clothing worn inside the home, but presentable enough to wear entertaining. This is the only example that I could find in the movie, this buttercream jacket with a pink skirt. According to blogger Brocade Goddess, pet en lairs and other jackets would be worn with either a matching petticoat or a quilted one in a solid, contrasting, coordinating color. The pink fabric appears to be the same fabric as her pink fitting dress, which we're about to see a little bit later. Along with all of the wigs, gowns, shoes, and jewelry, Marie has an incredible wardrobe of nightgowns, robes, and shifts. All of her nightgowns are white or off-white and trimmed with ribbons and lace and bows. She even bathes in a chemise, although they are very thin and gauzy. She has some gorgeous dressing gowns, something that she wears in her apartment when she doesn't feel up to dressing for the day. This spa day number is especially fantastic. She also wears this wrap dressing gown when her and her BFFs go on a shopping and pastry eating spree. According to the costumer's guide, this scene shows a dressing robe similar to her one with pink feathered shoulders, but this one is peach with blue feathers on the shoulders instead. And she wears this peignoir style robe over a sky blue colored stays while having her height-defying wig attended to. And this is possibly the same robe, but with a bit of pink ruching trim added. And this brocade robe when attending to her new babe, and upon receiving the sad news that the king has died. And then there are times when just stockings and a fan will do. And finally, this cotton, maybe linen robe with a wide blue ribbon accent. It's hard to see it in these screen grabs, but this is essentially the same silhouette as an English gown. Marie is pictured here picnicking with her hunting party. Her costume looks like a redingote to me. According to the Met, the redingote is a dress inspired by English men's riding coats and was one of many new, informal styles fashionable for women in the 1780s. I had the same thought about this pale green silk dress worn with a berger hat, a flat-brimmed straw hat with a shallow crown. Marie's Rose's gown is an example of robes à la Polonaise. According to the Met, the robe à la Polonaise is a style of gown with a close-fitting bodice and the back of the skirt gathered up into 3 separate puff sections to reveal the petticoat below. The bodice and skirt of the robe are cut in one with no waist seam. The Polonaise gown first came into fashion in the 1770s, the same year Marie was married. The bodice is also a zone front. In this picture, you can see that the overgown is a separate piece from the petticoat. Here's a portrait of Marie Antoinette in such a gown. Marie wears this yellow silk gown. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of the back, so I'm not entirely sure if it's Polonaise, but based upon the swooped-up petticoat front, I believe that it is. According to the Versailles blog, yellow was one of those colors that survived throughout the 18th century due to its innumerable shades. Everything from the palest yellow to primrose to a deep saffron yellow could be found in the milliner's shops. Towards the last years of the French royal family, however, yellow was not in good standing with the French people. Yellow and black happened to be the colors of the Habsburg Empire, and as their then hated Queen Marie Antoinette was Austrian, yellow became associated with the counter-revolution. This soft blue dress is an example of a robe à l'anglaise retroussée. There is a subtle but important difference between the Polonaise and retroussée. According to De Mode Couture, the robe à l'anglaise retroussée, where the bodice and skirt are not cut as one, is the French term for any dress with skirts looped up retroussée, which means looped or pulled up. Here's a close-up of the beautiful trimmings along the neckline. And this soft pink gown, worn when Marie greets the American soldiers, is another example of this. Spanish fashion designer Manolo Blahnik who created Marie Antoinette's 18th century inspired shoes, said, "When Milena Canonero called me, I put everything else to the side." To make them, he found documentation in books and closely studied collections of 18th century shoes in museums in Paris and London. He also spent hours researching the works of French and English painters. This helped Loney bring to his designs a refined elegance, pastel colors, love for unusual lines, and use of luxurious fabrics, including embroidered silk. Of this notable scene during the I Want Candy montage, Canonero says of the placement of Converse, "Some things in the movie were a bit tongue-in-cheek. It was to make a link with today's life. The way Sofia saw Marie Antoinette is a very modern, feminine, and intelligent way to see the journey into womanhood of a young girl who's been sent away from home to a totally unknown place, where they speak a different language and where the modes and manners are quite different from the way she was brought up." In these two portraits, Marie Antoinette is wearing zone front gowns. According to the 18th century notebook, the zone front is a modern term for a late 18th century style of gown bodice that appears to be cut away, often at an angle from the neckline, sometimes from slightly lower on the bodice, revealing a zone, a sort of false waistcoat front. During a dress fitting, Marie is trying on a zone front candy floss pink gown. The costumer's guide states that it's unclear if this half-made gown is the same as the gown used in the Vogue photo shoot or not. The trimmings in these still images show that they look the same as the Vogue cover, but are different from the dress fitting in the movie. Once again, we get to see her stays. The costumer's guide also stated that it's also possible that the Vogue dress is the same as the Pink Roses opera gown like we see here. This zone front piano gown is also a robe à la Polonaise, with its swept-up skirts and festooned with ribbon embellishments. What makes this white silk gown easily one of my favorites is the wide inverted box pleated trim that edges the zone front and the skirt opening, and a subtle touch of aqua. These trimmings, I believe, might be called robings, described in the Dictionary of Fashion History as broad flat trimmings decorating a gown around the neck and down the front of the bodice, and sometimes continued down the borders of an open over the skirt to the hem. She wears this dress in this scene with an amethyst necklace and earrings, and with a simple black ribbon choker. One of the costumer's guide's colleagues noted that this painting is a dead ringer for Marie Antoinette's piano gown. Here is an assortment of silk gowns that Marie wears, all with zone fronts, like this soft blue serenade gown, this blue striped gown, and this striped gown. As we move into the second act of the film, Marie wears this incredible zone front morning gown on the balcony at Versailles, and for this devastating scene at the opera. The gown appears to be more of a midnight blue than black, and it's decorated with swirls of ruched trimmings for a hint of sparkle. Marie wears this final zone front dress while posing for a portrait with who I am assuming is Madame Lebrun. She painted more than 30 portraits of the Queen and her family. This final gown without the belt might be inspired by this gown pictured here. Attempting to reject the vast array of commitments expected of a young queen, Marie retreats to the Petite Trianon, a neoclassical-style chateau located on the grounds of the Palace of Versailles. Soon after Louis XVI's coronation, fashion designer Rose Burton would present her newest creations to the Queen and spend hours discussing them. In this scene, Marie tells her dressmaker, likely Burton, that she wants something more simple, natural. From this, Marie has an entire wardrobe of white or nearly white gowns made for her. This two-piece costume looks very similar to this fashion plate of a camisole à la Polonaise made from Indian muslin instead of silk. It's also very similar to this Caraco jacket. All of the dresses, many unstructured and worn without stays, are created from non-silk fabrics such as cotton and muslin. In real life, the French silk industry suffered greatly because of this. These costumes are in the style of a zone front, but worn over a neoclassical style chemise. This costume differs in that Marie is playing the character of a milkmaid. Here she's wearing stays covered in French toile. Historian Katie Werlin writes on her blog that the Gaulle, or chemise à la Reine, was made infamous by Marie Antoinette in the early 1780s. The Gaulle consists of layers of thin muslin, loosely draped around the body and belted around the waist with a sash. She writes that, in contrast to the highly structured garments worn by the French court and society at large, the Gaulle was incredibly light and simple. It was the perfect garment for lounging in the country in the spring, and the fashionable ladies of France and England quickly took up the trend. There's a famous portrait of Marie Antoinette dressed in a chemise à la Reine that was the subject of much controversy. I'll leave a link to Katie's in-depth article and her BBC video if you want to learn more. I've created this final section because I either do not have enough information on the gowns or I'm not entirely certain where to categorize them. To start, we have this soft pink gown. Sadly, we only see the top of it. The This Is Versailles blog stated that when Marie Antoinette reached her 30th birthday, she ceased wearing the delicate pinks of her youth. As the ill-fated queen stated, it was not suitable for a woman to continue to wear such a shade. This perfectly illustrated how her contemporary world viewed the color pink. This is one of my favorite costumes in the whole movie. If any of you know me, I adore ermine, and this gown is trimmed on the collar and cuffs what looks like a faux ermine. The black flecks appear to be feathers. The Costumer's Guide says on her blog that the gown reminds her of this 18th century plate pictured on the right. Marie's masquerade ball gown, and the first time we see her in black outside of her morning gowns, appears to have the characteristics of a robe à la Turque, with the distinguishing feature being, according to American Duchess, the short sleeves worn over longer undersleeves. I think the sheer ribbon used as a mask is pure genius. It also reminded me of Blade Runner. The gown was also used in this Vogue photo shoot. According to the Costumer's Guide, this to die for cloak is actually from The Affair of the Necklace. This light blue open gown has a faux zone front, and it's worn with this lovely contrasting velvet belt with a rhinestone buckle. The color of the gown is fitting, as it seems to match Marie's melancholy state. Adding to the darker tone of the final act, Marie wears this black silk morning gown for her daughter Sophie's funeral, who in real life died of fever as an infant. She wears it with another cloak, a hat, and sheer veil. She wears the same gown here, but without the cloak. This appears to be a round gown, which was a fitted back gown with a skirt and petticoat sewn as one. According to American Duchess, round gowns existed through the 18th century, but became extremely common from the 1770s through the 1790s. Marie wears it with a contrasting sash. This soft pink gown also appears to be cut in the same way as her morning gown. I wasn't sure where to put this open coat dress, so I put it here. And you can disagree with me if you want, but I'm not really that crazy about it. I think it's partly the silk taffeta of the overgown. Maybe velvet might have been a better option, in my humble opinion. It's possible that they were trying to age up Kirsten Dunst a bit. Kirsten was in her mid-20s at the time of shooting, while Marie was 37 at the time of her execution. And finally, we have this look that Marie wears when she says goodbye to Versailles. It appears that it's just a house gown that she's wearing on top of a chemise, hastily dressed when being taken from Versailles. And if you made it through all 70 of Marie Antoinette's costumes, I want to send a big shout out to the Costumer's Guide and to Mariana London, who allowed me to use all of her pictures from her visit to the Textile Museum in Prato, Tuscany. And you can find links to Mariana's blog and Instagram account, and a link to the Costumer's Guide in the description below. As always, thank you for spending time with me. I'll see you in the next video.